What ruins marriage growth? The answer is very simple: perfection. Why? Because once you've achieved perfection, you don't need to grow anymore. So in marriage, when you have a perfect model, the way the marriage should be, could be, might be, ought to be, that immediately ruins all the possible growth. Because you already have the perfect model, you've already created the perfect model. So the only thing that's left is conforming your marriage to your model. And conforming is not growth. Conforming is not fun. Conforming is just force pushing your marriage in a certain direction, and that is specifically not growth. Additionally, when you have a perfect strategy, you create strategies to bring forth your perfect model, and you've noticed in your marriage, when those strategies don't work perfectly, you get angry because something has ruined the perfection. But again, that's not growth. And you start laying out all the steps in detail for your mind, your heart, your body, for your partner, requiring them to follow your strategy perfectly. But there's no growth there. That's just conformity. But underneath the model and the strategy is the knowledge. Models and strategies are based on thoughts, emotions, and actions. They're tangible. But the knowledge is something spiritual. When you know the way marriage should be, you don't need to grow anymore. You already know it all. You already have it in perfection. So the only thing remaining is forcefully conforming your mind, your heart, your body, your marriage partner, and the world around you into a perfect expression of the perfect knowledge you already have. But there's no growth needed there. You've already fully achieved the growth in your perfection. So now all that remains is conformity, and that ruins all the growth that marriage is supposed to be doing. So knowing the marriage standard requires forced conformity. When you have a perfect model, a perfect strategy built on perfect knowledge, you don't need to grow. So how is marriage grown then? Well, it's very simple. If the problem is perfection, the solution is being imperfect. So you would have a growing model. You wouldn't really know exactly how your marriage is supposed to be, but you're going to be growing it anyway. This is very exciting. And your mind, heart, and body and your partner like this idea. You have a concept that's growing, a model that's growing, but it's not perfect yet. It hasn't reached fruition. Therefore, they can have a part to play in molding this model. Same thing with your strategies. You don't want a perfect strategy. You want a growing strategy, something that's not yet reached a pinnacle. It's still in process, and that allows your mind, heart, and body, your partner, even the world around you to play a part in the growth of your marriage. But beneath all this, you have to have growing knowledge. And this is disturbing for us, because if your knowledge is growing, that means you don't fully know anything. You don't know what the marriage is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like, how it's supposed to function. You're growing those things, you're learning about those things, but they haven't yet reached perfection. So human marriage grows into the likeness, but never actually becomes like God's marriage. You learn from God's marriage, but His marriage is infinite. So you're always going to be growing into that infinite knowledge, but you'll never actually achieve it. That allows your marriage to grow, never achieving perfection. So why is marriage grown? Well, first is to cultivate your likeness. You're a unique spiritual being, and you want to express yourself out into the world. However, once you engage in a marriage, it's no longer just you. You're going to cultivate your marital likeness together. This is a fusion of two minds, two hearts, and two bodies coming together into one flesh. And inside that one flesh are two distinct souls. And you're going to work together cultivating your marital likeness. As that marital likeness matures, you're then going to do more in expressing and cultivating a kingdom which has its own likeness, where there's children, a larger family structure, friends, businesses, where you work. This is a whole living entity which involves many more people than just two souls. So that likeness is extremely vast, but at the center of all that is you and what you're creating through your marriage in your kingdom. So being created in God's likeness requires creating in your own likeness. God wants you to do this. Why? Because He creates in His likeness, and He gave you that ability. Not the ability to create in His likeness, but your own. It's a unique responsibility, and it's at the core of what we enjoy doing as human beings. So who grows marriage? Well, remember, if you already know what marriage is, if you have a perfect knowledge, you're not going to grow anything. So the most important thing is that you be imperfect. God does not grow marriage. Why? Because He's already perfect. His marriage would be perfect. There's no growth needed in His marriage at all because it already has attained infinite perfection. However, you are not perfect, and that makes you ideally suited to grow your marriage. You also need to be ignorant. One who's ignorant needs to grow in knowledge. Do you know fully what marriage is supposed to be? Of course you don't. Well, that makes you ignorant, and that's good. That means you need to grow that knowledge of what marriage is supposed to be, and then you want to practice that, whatever you're growing. You want to use thoughts, emotions, and actions and express out what you're growing, always aware that nothing you have will be perfect. And that's good. That allows you to keep growing your marriage. You'll also be one who's increasing. This is very exciting for human beings. Why? Because you were created to grow, to be ever increasing. And you can always be ever increasing. Why? Because God's infinite and you are not. So in between not being infinite and God being infinite, you can grow forever and ever and ever. And as you grow, so does your marriage. So as your soul grows, so grows your marriage.